Good morning, everyone. Could you just confirm that you could hear me okay? Perfect. Thank you, William. So yes, good morning. Thank you very much for joining me today on this webinar. My name is Andy Pearson. I've been in recruitment now about 20 plus years, something like that, longer than I care to remember. I spent about 3 years internally working for a well-known defence organisation, actually MBDA Missile Systems, and that was very much an internal recruitment role. So I was, as part of that role, responsible for recruitment within certain areas. I also did all or pretty much all of the interviewing with hiring managers, supporting them from a sort of HR perspective. So really what I wanted to do was just share my experience and hints and tips, especially for you in support of Armed Forces Week, in terms of actually, putting your best foot forward and really making you stand out, especially in the current climate where it's going to be more competitive than ever due to what's going on in the world. Lots of the people that I would interview, the candidates I would interview, were service leavers. So again, I've got some experience about really some of the things you can draw out, some of the experiences, training, knowledge, etc., that you can draw out in terms of putting your best foot forward. So it looks like we might have a problem. Looks like maybe some of you are okay. Apologies if there are some issues, just let me know. We have relationships with CTP, the Officers Association. We've signed the Armed Forces Covenant, and we've been awarded the bronze. We're working towards our silver in terms of the recognition scheme. And we have relationships with Raja, REMI as well, just again in terms of supporting service leavers. So I'm just going to share now a slide deck that I have created. Let me just get so you can see me. So hopefully now you should all be able to see the main presentation, and I'm in the bottom left-hand corner. What I would ask, guys, is if you could please just save any questions till the end. It's probably easier to do it that way. So please write them down, and at the end I'll stay online for probably 20 minutes, however long it takes, just to answer any of your questions, if that's okay. So let's move on. So we've done that bit. That's a bit about me. I think I've covered that bit off. So the idea of this session really is to share experience. It's all about, I think nowadays, really, your CV has to be good to get you the opportunity in the first place to sit in front of the interviewers. But now there's lots of hints and tips that we can share, really just to make sure you are putting your best foot forward. Let's go on to that. So from, if I put my hiring manager hat on and think about the time when I was interviewing candidates, so much of it nowadays is about finding the right candidate for a cultural fit, so we're looking at attitude and behaviors. Of course, we're looking to talk about transferable skills. We'll talk a bit more about that in a second. Your experience and knowledge is obviously paramount, but passion and interest in the opportunity in the business. And from my experience, candidates would often, or in some cases, step forward, come for an interview. They could no doubt do the job, but they'd be pipped at the post by someone who was demonstrating a real, genuine passion and interest for the business and for the opportunity. So if we talk a bit more about the cultural fit, many clients nowadays will be using competence-based interviews. They'll also look at perhaps situational-based interviews. And these are really looking at your behaviors and your attitude. What have you done in a previous scenario or situation to make a difference, to make yourself stand out or to come up with a solution? So, your personality, your attitude, they're all really paramount things that are being measured during an interview. So it's really important to make sure that you are positive, making eye contact, coming across really well and answering questions concisely. And again, all of these I'll build on as we go through the rest of the presentation. In terms of skills, I think, really important for those who are leaving the services, you have a brilliant skill set. You've been trained extremely well. The caliber of candidates that we see coming out of the armed forces is generally very high. So you are very attractive to customers. So, you've got experience with leadership, you've got experience with, following orders, taking direction. Teamwork, essentially, nowadays everyone is looking for that. And again, those are real things that you should think about in terms of transferable skills. And the other key thing I think as well, armed forces veterans or service leavers will have is generally being very solution focused. Actually able to look at a problem, think about what it is, and come up with various solutions. So try if you can to draw on those bits of transferable skills just as sort of areas of aptitude. In terms of your experience now, depending if you are going and moving into defence related organisations, if you are, then clearly there's going to be a lot of crossover there. Organisations themselves will have relationships with, having signed the Armed Forces Covenant, there'll be supporters of reservists, etc. So they are very open to hiring from the Armed Forces, but you will be able to offer them specific domain experience. Whether that be around land, air, sea, you might be familiar with particular products or systems, which will be of interest to them. You may have experience in country where they are deploying a project or a technology, and you'll be familiar with the inner workings of the, whether it be the Army, the Navy, or the Royal Air Force, decision-making processes. You may well have a personal network within that domain as well. So really important just to think about the domain experience that you've got and what that can bring to the role or the company that you are interviewing with. Communication is paramount today, especially in situations like this where you may well be interviewing via Zoom or Skype or whatever it may be, Microsoft Teams. So just making sure that you are communicating openly, freely, using body language to express what you are trying to communicate, whilst remaining concise. And this is quite important, I think. Again, I'll build on it as we go through and we talk more about interview questioning and techniques. But just making sure that you take a pause every now and again, you take your time and you think about your answers or what you are communicating. And really just try and stay concise, not waffling or digressing off the topic. It's easier said than done sometimes, and it's easier for some of us than others. The final point is really just being, passionate about that organisation, the role that you're going for. Let's imagine there were 5 candidates going for an interview. One of those candidates is genuinely interested, expresses their passion, their desire, their interest in the organisation. They've done their homework on the organisation, their current news, what contracts they've just signed, whatever's going on. That is the candidate that more than likely, if you're all square on and all level on the transferable skills and experience, it's going to be that passion and that interest that will stand you aside. So, really important, I think, and don't underestimate that personality that you're trying to communicate at interview stage. So just moving on to the next slide. So in terms of doing your research, really important. Again, it was quite apparent when I was interviewing people, those that would turn up to the interview and hadn't done any research, and they may say to you, well, that's why I've come along today, is to find out a bit more about the opportunity. It would often be a bit of a disappointment to me that they hadn't done homework. They hadn't looked at, the journey. Is it going to be sustainable? The company. They weren't aware of the company values, what they did, what was new in the product range, what they were striving for. And they weren't maybe sometimes aware of the role and responsibilities. Quite often I would say to them, right, tell me in your own words what you understand this opportunity to be about. And they would fall flat. They wouldn't have actually taken the time to really understand what they were interviewing for. So, quite early on in the interview, when typically these sorts of questions are covered off, you can let yourself down if you haven't done your research and your presentation. Always good to do a bit of research on the interviewers as well. What's their background? Where have they been before? Is there some icebreaker type conversation that you can have if you've worked at a similar company or you've come from the same regiment or whatever it may be? And the final bit is obviously refresh yourself with your CV. Make sure you are aware of, the salient points that you've got in there and what you have said in your CV, because the interviewers are going to be using that as a basis for your questioning. Presentation is really important. I'm dressed down today, but if I was going for an interview, I would certainly put a suit on. Again, I probably think carefully about whether I put a tie on. I think defence is still, if you're looking for roles within defence, it's still quite a formal industry to a certain degree. So for an interview, I'd probably put a tie on, but certainly a suit and a shirt. And yeah, just that interaction with people in terms of engaging with them, shaking hands. Again, whether we do that nowadays in the current climate, that may well change. But just being engaging with people before they are even starting the interview question. So, the client will be asking you questions. And I think it's important to engage your mind in interview mode before you go in. So have a think about, what do you think the client will be asking you? Will it be about that period on your CV? Will it be about that gap in your CV? Will it be about what you did on a certain project? And really start to anticipate and perhaps, think in advance what that client is going to be asking you, and then prepare your thought process or perhaps some notes on how you would answer those questions. Just while I'm on that topic, I don't think there's any harm whatsoever in, when you sit down in the interview, saying to the interviewers, I have done some research, I have prepared some notes. Would you mind if I get them out and have them in front of me so I can refer to them during the interview? Again, for me, if people ever asked that, it was a big tick in the box, actually. It sort of showed that they had prepared and they were taking it seriously. So again, give yourself the best opportunity that you can. And if you have prepared any notes or a mind map or whatever format you may do to focus your mind during the interview, do feel free to ask the interviewers if you can pull it out and have it on the table in front of you. Also worth thinking about some relevant questions that you want to ask them. I do talk about this a bit later on, but again, I think it shows interest in terms of engaging with those people who are ultimately going to make a decision. And it will give you, hopefully, a good understanding of the business and the role. So it might be a question about, why did you join the business? What do you enjoy about working here? How would you describe the culture? Could be anything like that. Or it might be more specific around, obviously, tell me a bit more about the role. What phase are you at the moment? What are the challenges that you're facing? What do you see as the opportunities related to this role in the future? Okay, so just moving on. Some example questions. So we talked about them. I think I've covered these off, but what attracted you? What's the induction and the training program look like? How would you describe a typical day? What phase of the project? All those sorts of things, just genuinely showing interest in the company, the role, and that individual who's sitting opposite you. I'm sure you'll be able to think of some questions of your own, but just a few there that might give you some guidance. So this is just a sort of checklist, I suppose, before leaving for the interview. So on the day, make sure you know where you're going. If you're traveling by public transport, just check there are no delays, there's no roadworks or works being done on the railways. Make sure you've got any contact numbers that you may need. If you're going through a recruitment agency such as Maine, then make sure you've got your consultant's telephone number just in case you're running late or just in case you can't find the address. Again, have you got the names of the interviewers, who you're going to ask for when you turn up at reception? Quite often nowadays with organisations, especially in defence, they will require you to take copy of UK photo ID, so passport, national insurance card, driving licence will generally do. And yeah, just a quick checklist there really for you to think through and just check before you leave the house. Hopefully it's all makes sense there. No rocket science really. So the interview itself, whether it's a face-to-face interview or a Skype or video conference, make sure you've turned your mobile device off. Never good when it rings. It has happened and it does happen. First impressions count. So again, that first engagement, the pre-interview conversations, the icebreaker type conversations, really important there to just sort of demonstrate your personality and make sure that you are, really demonstrating what you're about. Interviews are very much two-way processes. It is a case that, of course, they are assessing you, but you are also assessing them. So do prepare the questions, do think of it from that perspective. You want to walk away, hopefully, with a deeper understanding of the role, the responsibilities, the opportunities that this role may bring you. And it's also a case where they're going to be, looking for you to put your best foot forward. So take your time. I always would say this to people that I was interviewing, take your time, think of the best answer that you can. And Try and engage with everyone in the room if you can, making eye contact, looking around the room. Don't just talk to one interviewer in the room. I've experienced it myself where I was in the room, and because I was asking the questions, the candidates were just looking at me and addressing me. And at the end of the interview, the other interviewer had obviously picked up on that and would draw reference to it. So very important to sort of work the room, as they may say, and make sure you're engaging with everyone there. It's again a different world at the moment. I wouldn't suggest that we're at the stage yet where we're shaking hands, but certainly make sure if it is a face-to-face interview that there's a good end to the interview, a very positive end to the interview. Again, eye contact, smiling, thanking them for their time before you leave and head off. So if it is a video or a phone interview, it has its challenges, especially if it is a phone interview, because there's no body language. There's no, as we are here today, you can see me moving around and gesturing and that sort of thing. A phone interview, it's just a voice on the end of a phone. So, really important in that example that you are using really well constructed sentences. You're being very specific about what you have done, what you've communicated in the past, difficult situations, that sort of thing. But the key things are, make sure you're somewhere quiet where you're not going to get interrupted. I've jumped into a meeting room today. Make sure there's good background. I've sat in the office where we've got this behind us. From your perspective, if you're sitting at home, make sure there's no piles of washing or dirty dishes sitting behind you on the worktop. Again, if you are at home and you've got the kids and or the dog or whatever, just make sure they're away from you and they're not going to start barking. That's the dog, not the kids, during the interview. There may be some issues, as we had at the beginning of this, where things freeze or there's time delays in terms of that. And again, just be prepared for that. Taking a pause, perhaps between the interviewer finishing the question and you answering, just allows you to make sure there is no time delay. And again, just being upbeat and positive. I can't stress that enough. It can be a main differentiator between you and the other candidates. If someone's very, mundane and they're not really coming across as particularly motivated or positive or passionate, then it is going to perhaps stand you out. So really making sure you're giving full and complete answers and just being as positive as you can about the opportunity and about the interview. So again, nowadays, quite commonplace is perhaps for second stage or third stage interviews that you may be asked to create a presentation. Normally, you will be given a specific topic to present on. It might be related to the role. It could be around presenting, what would your first steps be in the role? What would your 30-day plan look like? What do you understand about our product and how would you describe this or present it to clients? They may ask you to do a bit of analysis on a product or on a topic and present that back. So whatever the topic is, you should hopefully be sent this well in advance. Again, if you're working with a recruitment company or a recruiter, seek their advice. Run the presentation past them. Generally, the medium is sort of PowerPoint or a PDF document that's going back to them. Try and avoid death by PowerPoint. I would always suggest about 8 slides is probably enough. We should be able to get across what you're looking for in those 8 slides. Incorporating images is always good. Again, especially, their logo, brands, their products, something that's related to them just will make you stand out. And the final tip is that, with PowerPoint, especially perhaps for those who are less used to presenting PowerPoint or presenting full stop, try not to read verbatim what's written on your slides. Generally the audience will be sitting there and looking at the slide deck. They'll be reading the words that you've put up on the screen or projecting up. Your job really is to bring that to life and to talk around that, hopefully, as I'm trying to or attempting to do today. There's some key bullet points on the slides, but I'm able to verbalize them without just reading them verbatim as we go through. Do make sure you've got a backup version of your document. Again, it depends where you're going. If you're going into a defense organization or even some more security conscious organizations, they might not be happy with you using a USB. to upload. So you normally would email your presentation in advance, either directly to the client if that's what they've asked for, or to your recruitment consultant, and they will send it across. But just in case, I would have printed versions, or even maybe not just in case, but just to hand out to the room, so they can make notes or they can see it in front of them without having to look at the screen. And again, eye contact with the room, make sure you're engaging with people. You're in control of that presentation. So I would tend to suggest it's good to set out the boundaries at the beginning. I'm going to present, we'll save questions and answers to the end if we may, but if there's anything urgent as we go through, please just, let me know and I'll try and answer your question as we go. Something like that. So again, you're just setting the scene in terms of what they should be expecting from the presentation as well. So moving on to some different styles of questioning. You may well all be familiar with these, so forgive me if I am teaching you to suck eggs here, but competence-based interview questions are generally quite widely used by most organizations. The reason that they like them is because if I was to say to you, what would you do if, that's good, and that shows me a certain thinking and how you might work in a certain situation, but it's a hypothetical question. You're telling me what you would do. A competence-based question is looking for you to tell me what you did do in the past. So it's looking for you to draw on a specific scenario or situation where you've encountered that particular area of questioning. Questions might be around the company value. So let's say the company value was integrity. They might ask you a question that says, tell us about a time when you demonstrated integrity when it would have been easier not to. Or they might say tell us about a time when you let someone down. So, think about those examples, think about some scenarios and situations that they might draw on. Typical sorts of questions might be around communication, it might be about managing others, they might be related to having difficult scenarios to deal with, challenging situations, how did you overcome them? And I think it's really important, and a particular trick or tip for competence-based questions is to really focus on I as opposed to we. It's really quite hard when you come to do it because we're all trained nowadays and we live in a world where it's generally very team-focused and we talk as we did this. But the interviewer isn't interested in what the team did, they're interested in what you did. So really do a bit of practice, do a dry run, get with your family members or friends or colleagues or with your recruiter to go through it in finer detail and make sure you're pulling out what you did in each of those examples. So I was responsible for, I implemented, I created, I developed, whatever it may be. But yeah, what they're looking for there is I. So continuing on that same sort of competence-based thought train, try if you can to think about STAR as an acronym. So talk about the situation, what was the situation? So a bit of background. What did you do? What options did you consider? And what did you actually do then once what was the reason for choosing that final solution? Why did you choose that one over others? How did you implement it? What was the outcome? And it's always nice, I think, at the end of a competence-based answer to try and demonstrate what you learnt from that experience or what you would do differently given that same scenario again. And that's good because it shows a bit of sort of self-reflection on a situation. It shows the ability to learn and adapt and develop what we do as individuals, or what you do as an individual, more importantly. So yeah, a typical interview, a good answer for me would be, this was the situation. This is what the first steps I did. These were the options I considered. This is why I went with the option that I did. This was the outcome. And looking back now, if I would do anything differently, I would probably do this, or I would anticipate that. Hopefully that all makes sense there in terms of competence-based interviews. You will or should expect some other questions, the more typical sort of interview questions. So what motivates you? What do you enjoy doing? Tell us about your hobbies or interests, excuse me. Yeah, again, and they're buying into you, so they want to know what you are interested in, what you do outside work, what sport you may follow, Tell them about your family. You know, what's important to you there. They will ask you, you know, what do you know about their business? You know, I definitely would be asking anyone, and I do ask anyone who comes to potentially work here at Maine, you know, what do they know about us? What sectors do we work in? What do you think, you know, what did you learn from the website? And again, they'll ask you questions about your previous role. And I typically always used to say, you know, tell me one thing that you really enjoyed about your last position and tell me one thing that you might change. And that just gives me, perhaps, as an interviewer, a feeling for what you enjoyed, and a feeling for perhaps things that you would want to change or evolve in your new position. So, you know, we are committed at Maine in terms of supporting the UK defence sector. I'm more than happy to, my contact details are at the end of this presentation. I'm more than happy to pick anything up offline with you guys. Look at your CVs if you would like any help or a review of your CV. You know, defence is something I'm very passionate about, having spent my, you know, almost 3 years internally with MBDA. And we as a company are committed to the sector and the industry. So I just wanted to sort of suggest, you know, do sign up to our website. There are job alerts on there, so you can register sort of parameters in terms of what you're looking for, and then you'll receive daily or weekly updates when we are logging new vacancies. So we're almost at the point where I'll open it up to chat. Please do feel free to ask any question. I hope this session has been useful. You know, either just reinforcing things that you already know or things that perhaps you hadn't thought about. I think that's the key thing, is just, you know, prior to any interview, do try and stretch your thinking. You know, what do I think they're going to be asking me? What do I think they're going to be interested in me? And just making sure that, as I mentioned earlier, that you're engaged in that sort of interview mode in your thinking. A dry run with colleagues, with family at home, or you're certainly with your recruiter, they should be open to doing it. Yeah, I hope it's been good there. At the end of this webinar, you will get sent a copy of this presentation, and all my contact details are on this next slide that I'm showing you now. So I'll open the chat room up. Please do feel free to ask any questions now. William has asked a question: with PowerPoint presentations, would you recommend giving an introduction about yourself? For me, it would be prior to the interview. I wouldn't do an introduction. I would just stay on topic with the presentation. I think, you know, generally my first slide, or I would anticipate the first slide, is a sort of summarization of the question or the task that has been given to you, just so it's there, so everyone is clear as to what you are trying to address. If it is relevant to the topic, if it was a presentation that was more, you know, about experience that you could bring, then I don't think it's a negative to have a bit of an intro about you. But if it was a business related topic, or, you know, do some analysis on this product or this project or whatever, I wouldn't do a personal introduction. They've got your CV. You know, generally before you launch into the presentation, you normally had a first stage interview. You've probably had the icebreaker type conversations anyway, before you actually launch into the presentation at interview stage. So I'd probably try and avoid it, and I'd just stay on topic with the presentation. Hope that answers that one. Are there any questions, any other questions at all that I can answer while I'm online? I don't mind staying on for a while, but just while you're all here, it might benefit the others to share any questions, if there are any other questions at all. I'll just have a quick drink. So no other questions coming forward at the moment. I just, you know, like to take the opportunity. Brilliant, thanks, Stuart. Stuart just said thank you, useful slides. Yeah, these are going to be available. Please feel free to refer to them. My direct number and my email are on there. I genuinely mean it. I'm really passionate about this industry and helping everyone find roles. So if you want to reach out to me directly offline, please do. Happy to review CVs. And I certainly wish you all the best. I know someone mentioned, I think Will, has got a couple of interviews coming up. So, you know, if I can help at all, Will, feel free to reach out to me. I certainly wish you all the best with those and everyone else who may have some other interviews pending or coming up in the future. And yeah, stay positive, everyone. Take care, and I certainly hope to see you or speak with you soon. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Take care.